Hello, my name is David Meltzer. I'm the Secretary General of GVF. GVF is the global trade association for the satellite industry, with members from all regions of the world representing the entire satellite ecosystem. And I'm here representing the Global Satellite Coalition. The Global Satellite Coalition is a grouping of the world's leading trade associations for the satellite industry, trade associations that focus on Europe, Middle East, and Africa in the case of ASOA, AVIA, and APSCC in Asia Pacific, Communications Alliance in Australia, and certainly ABRASAT and Satellite Industry Association in Brazil and the United States, respectively. It's my pleasure to host a panel to go in greater detail on WRC-23, really focusing on agenda items of particular interest to the satellite industry. We have an excellent panel joining us, and I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. We have Paulo Bertrand of Star One, we have Michelle Caldera of SES, Adrian Abera Gonzalez of Hispasat, and finally Hector Fortis of Eutelsat. Welcome all, and thank you again for serving on the panel. Paulo, why don't we start with you? If you could just take a minute to introduce yourself and describe your role at Star One.
Okay, I'm working at Star One. Star One now is not an independent company, and it actually is. It's part of it's a department in Claro, which is a major mobile and telecommunications operator in the Latin America. And I work as a satellite engineering consultant at Star One, dealing with all issues related to satellite system communication issues and modeling techniques and that.
Guys, I think we just briefly lost David from the stream there. So he's just coming back in. So I'm going to add him back and you guys can carry on.
Okay, David.
So I'm sorry, there may have been Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paulo. Michelle, just take a minute if you can and talk about your role.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon to all, or good evening. My name is Michelle Caldeira. I work for SES. I'm based in São Paulo. I am responsible for the regulatory department here in Brazil. I deal with the Brazilian regulator on a daily basis. I'm also member of the board of ABRASAT and Intelsat, the Brazilian Satellite Industry Association. I'm also member of the Brazilian delegation. Here in this panel, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Brazilian delegation. I'm here speaking on behalf of the satellite industry of GVF and SES. But then it's a pleasure to be participating of this panel. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Michelle. And Adrian, over to you.
Hello to all, and thank you for inviting me. I work for the satellite operator Hispasat that mainly operates in Europe and America. My title is Spectrum Engineer, and what I do is I coordinate the ITU satellite networks with other operators that Hispasat operates, and also I participate in the ITUR study cycles and actively go to the World Radio Conference and the European process.
Thank you very much, Adrian. It seems like we've lost Hector. Hopefully we can get him back online, but until we do, let's go right into the agenda items that we want to focus on. And I think perhaps the agenda item of greatest interest to the satellite industry, and if the survey that was conducted during the just completed panel discussion on WRC-23 is any indication, I think for many of the viewers of this discussion, agenda item 1.2 is the most important item on the agenda for WRC-23. And briefly, agenda item 1.2 is asking the conference to consider identification of frequency bands in the 3 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, 7 gigahertz, and 10 gigahertz frequencies, seeking to consider identifying spectrum for IMT, including additional allocations to mobile service on a primary basis. And I see Hector, glad you were able to rejoin us. Technical issues in the era of COVID,
yeah.
we all understand. So let me go back and ask Hector to spend just a minute introducing yourself and your role in the company, and then we'll come back to 1.2 and I'll see comments on 1.2. So Hector, just take a minute to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm sorry for the inconvenience with these technical issues, but well, my name is Hector Fortis. I'm a director of the regulatory director in Eutelsat Americas, that we provide all the satellite communications around the world. But here in America, I'm in charge of all the regulatory issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. Okay, so 1.2, I've teed it up as perhaps the most important agenda item from the satellite industry, and let's ask our panelists what they think. Paolo, why don't you give us the first view on agenda item 1.2?
Okay, thanks. Concerning agenda item 1.2, one of the main issues, we're looking at several frequency bands, but the one that I will focus on is on the C-band, because it's the one that greatly affects us in Brazil. Right now, the Brazilian administration is going forward and preparing for an auction in 3.3 to 3.7. And initially, they were considering only going up to 3.6, but now they're considering also going up to 3.7 gigahertz. And so this is one of the major issues that we have right now. They have set up a public consultation, and CGSAT, of which we are a member, has proposed several technical aspects that need to be considered in the auction of this specific band. And that is going to be considered by Anatel, that's the Brazilian administration, when it sets up the actual auction. It's expected to be in some time in next year, probably the beginning of the second semester. And what does this affect us, and what are our main expectations considering C-band? In Brazil, we have basically two types of very important issues that should be considered. The first one is that we have a very large number of receive-only domestic terminals that actually they're not a specific service. It works like a DBS service, but it's actually they just make use of signals that are present on the satellite. But it's a huge number. It's something like 20 million households. And so it has already been determined that when you use C-band for IMT, and basically it's going to be used for 5G, they use very high-powered transmitters, which affect all transmissions in the adjacent band. And this will pose a problem for this huge number of users, and they are not entitled to any type of protection right now. Actually, the protection is the large numbers. The second issue that we have is now that's actually the professional services that make use of the band from 3.625 to 3.7 extended C-band. Several operators in the region, they make use of that spectrum for professional services. And since it's let's say it's a consensus that IMT with mobile terminals and Earth stations working in the same band, they can't coexist in the same geographic region. So what Anatel has proposed is what can be done to move the professional services from 3.6 to 3.7 to the upper C-band. And we have gone with this. All satellite operators in Brazil have gathered, and they have presented work to Anatel, just considering that type of impact. And it's not a very small impact. It's a huge impact. So if you can just bring up this a slide right now. This slide, it's more or less just summarizes the types of impact that we are considering. The first one, we have direct costs connected to that. Those are actually moving the users and carriers from below 3.7 to the upper band. And for that, in the satellite industry, typically what you have to do, you have to, for some period of time, you have to transmit in both bands, because you have hubs and you have several Earth stations connected to that hub. You can't do that at the same time. And so that requires additional equipment to be bought and allocated at stations. This is a direct cost. We also have now a cost that's not associated, let's say, with the direct services that are provided by operators, but all the users that make use of the band. They will have to introduce into their the receiving side, they'll have to introduce filters, because right now our low noise amplifiers, they do not filter out adjacent signals when they are very high, such as the ones that will be used by IMT. And so you'll have to equip all the stations that will be affected with filters, and that is something that will affect something like, in terms of Brazil, something like 30,000 users. So it's a very large user base, and it doesn't come cheap to do that. And besides those direct costs, we also have the, let's say, the economic compensations that are due, because a lot of investment has been done in that lower extended C-band, including all the satellites and the space segment that has already been purchased, and it's fine right now, and that won't be able to be used then. And so the satellite sector is entitled to compensation for not being able to use that. That's in the Brazilian regulations, and it's something that has been presented to Anatel, what is expected from the satellite operators in Brazil. And the last issue, the fourth one, is since IMT actually wants to go forward as fast as possible, so for that to be possible, an incentive can be given to the satellite operators, so that they will actually be able to do some of those transitions from the lower C-band to the higher C-band to free the spectrum for IMT in a shorter time period. So that's also item 4. So you can bring back the slide right now. And that's the main issue with C-band. So C-band is very critical, and it's very important in Brazil. So at this point, Anatel is conducting studies and going forward with everything that we have given. So if you want any more technical details, we'll be able to give that later on. And just going rapidly to the other bands, we're also considering, let's say, for example, a KU band 10 to 10.5 is being considered. It's not actually used by us right now, but it'll probably pose a similar problem. It's not exactly adjacent, but are low noise amplifiers that are actually deployed in huge numbers, because we make use of small terminals and DBS-like services in that band. So there are many thousands of, hundreds of thousands of users making use of that band, and probably they will be affected with high power IMT in nearby bands. So we may come up with more problems in KU, and that's something that we, Anatel right now, its formal position is to go forward with the studies of the use of these bands, and that's something that we really have to work hard so that the studies actually will reflect all the issues and problems with sharing not exactly the same band, but sharing adjacent or near bands with from satellite to IMT.
Thank you, Paolo. So obviously very significant within the Brazilian market, not only concerns with interference, the costs of mitigating interference where mitigation is even possible, but then the risks to the 20 million TVRO consumers as well as enterprises. Very significant concerns in Brazil. I want to open it up to the other panelists to see if they have additional perspectives, whether they're focused on particular markets like Brazil, or if they're broader for the region. So who would like to address 1.2 as well? Okay, please go ahead, Hector.
Yes, David. Well, I would like to add to Paulo's comments that while there may be a global position, each country must make its decision in the context of its own reality. I mean, in other words, they need to consider several aspects as a orographic condition of our Latin American countries, and as well as the climate environment where the C-band, as everybody knows, is much more immune to the rain attenuation. But the most important here is the regulators they need to consider the existing services, because as Paulo mentioned, there is a lot of services around all the regions. Another point very important is the authorization that already granted, and the other point is the investment around the deployment of the satellite system. For example, for Eutelsat in Mexico, we have granted 3 concessions of orbital position for exclusive exploitation of frequency in C-band and KU bands. In C-band, this includes the 3.4 to 3.7 gigahertz. Which, and another point is that our concession were extended until 2037. So we have still we have several years to exploit the services. It's also important to note the Mexican government itself has its MEXAT systems operating in 3.4 to 3.7 band gigahertz to provide national security and social coverage services. Therefore, the importance of not considering the 3.6 to 3.8 gigahertz band for studies is clear, as we are not only talking about the technical implication. There must be legal certainty and investment security, among others. This is my comments at this time. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Hector. And so very, very significant concerns in the Mexican market. And I think you bring out a good point, which is the investment made, not just by the satellite operators such as Eutelsat, but many other companies in the entire value chain in the provision of services to consumers and businesses and governments, as is the case in Mexico. Michelle and Adrian, any thoughts on your part on 1.2? Adrian, go ahead.
Yes, just wanted to add, as Hector said, it's not that we continue providing services, it's that we also continue having high demand for C-band services, especially in America due to its characteristics and its resilient to rain. We did the internal exercise and we selected some services that we are providing in C-band in Hispasat, and we tried to see if we could provide the same quality of service in other band, and it was not possible, because for some critical services, the C-band is the only solution. I think it's important to take this into account, and as Bertrand previously said, it was also demonstrated that the coexistence in the same band is not possible, or it's only possible in very few cases. And agenda item 1.2 will have to study also the compatibility in adjacent bands, because, for example, in United States, we saw that the decisions were taken without considering any ATU criteria. This agenda item could set the basis for example, compatibility in adjacent band, which kind of filters need to be used, guard bands, protection criteria, and would be good to have technical basis, not to have to see every administration taking their own decisions and making their own studies and have many different solutions.
Well, excellent points. Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, Dave, no, just to add what my colleagues just said, that yeah, C-band, it's a key spectrum, not only in Brazil, but in the Latin American region, for many reasons, mainly for the geographic characteristics of the region, of Brazil, the climatic characteristics of Brazil and the Latin American region. So it's not easy to replace C-band for all the spectrum like KU or KA. And I think it's important for the regulators to take this into consideration when assigning spectrum for IMT or 5G. We know that 5G is important, and we want 5G. Satellite is part of the 5G, and we know that satellite will be part of the 5G network. But the regulators should take into consideration that it's not easy to replace the C-band for other bands for many kind of service that should be provided using C-band. And in case of SES, we have an SES-14, for instance, that was launched in 2018 with C-band. It's a satellite that we have a lifetime expected of 15 years. So I think it was Hector or Bertrand that mentioned the investment made. This is something that needs to be taken into consideration. So, and another band that we have concern is the 10 to 10.5, that we have operations in 10.7 that will likely be interfered when if this band is identified for IMT. And I think it needs to be taken into consideration, and studies need to consider the interference in the adjacent band. We have VSATs operating in 10.7 to 11.2, and I think studies should take into consideration all these services.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you all panelists on agenda item 1.2. Clearly, very, very significant concerns coming from the satellite industry with the threat of identifying existing spectrum on a primary basis for IMT, C-band, as well as other portions of the spectrum. I mean, threats to existing investments, existing services, high demand services, the costs involved where possible to mitigate interference, all very, very strong concerns. I want to shift gears a little to another agenda item, which perhaps is a little more hopeful, a little better news, if you will. And that is agenda item 1.15. And this concerns the provision of spectrum for Earth stations in motion. And specifically, agenda item 1.15 is looking at harmonizing the use of the frequency band 12.75 to 13.25 gigahertz Earth to space by Earth stations on aircraft and vessels communicating with geostationary space stations and fixed satellite globally. Certainly, the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted demand for such mobile services from aircraft and ships, but certainly this is a temporary phenomena, and demand, which was surging prior to the pandemic, will come back probably doubly strong when the effects of the pandemic dissipate. So clearly, this proposal on agenda item 1.15 would be of great interest to the satellite industry, which is providing services to Earth stations in motion. I'm going to ask Adrian to offer up his perspective on agenda item 1.15. Adrian?
Thank you, David. I think this is a very interesting concept because it's the introduction of the Earth station movement in the plan bands. As you said, the demand for connection in mobility is growing. Who is not addicted to be connected? At least I am, and the satellite operators, we see growth there. In the KU band, we now can offer this kind of services in the 14 to 14.5 gigahertz, only 500 megs. It's not enough. So with this new agenda item, we would have the possibility to offer this kind of services in 500 megahertz additionally. And the problem is these bands are plan bands. And the plan bands, what they do is they have to guarantee access to all administration and all nations to the spectrum. And there are some concerns about not pervert the plan bands. And in my view, it's a concern that is not correct, because what we are doing is we are giving also we are considering the possibility that those countries' administrations that want to use their plan will also have the possibility to use the plan within the FSS as they were expected to use, but also have the possibility to use these new services and use the SIMs. So we think it's very interesting, and it's going to make the spectrum, the use of the spectrum, more efficient. Hopefully we will have at the end of the conference, we will see this agenda item to succeed, because it's going to help all the satellite operators to provide better connection to mobility for in flight and for vessels.
Thank you, Adrian. Any of the other panelists want to offer perspectives on agenda item 1.15? Okay, so just to summarize, what Adrian was pointing out is that there's a lot of demand for services, satellite delivered services, to mobile platforms such as vessels and aircraft, and 1.15 would provide additional spectrum that is very much needed. Thank you, Adrian. There's a related agenda item 1.16, which calls for the study and development of technical, operational, and regulatory measures as appropriate to facilitate the use of the frequency bands 17.7 to 18.6 gigahertz, 18.8 to 19.3 gigahertz, and 19.7 to 20.2 gigahertz space to Earth, and 27.5 to 29.1 gigahertz, as well as 29.5 to 30 gigahertz Earth to space, by non-GSO fixed satellite service Earth stations in motion, while of course ensuring due protection of existing services in those frequency bands. So very much looking at the provision of services by non-geostationary orbiting satellite networks to mobile platforms in the KA band in particular. And I want to start with Michelle and see if, Michelle, you can offer your perspective on agenda item 1.16.
Thank you, David. So regarding this agenda item, so as we have been following, many non-GSO systems are being planned and designed to meet the growing demand for broadband connectivity. Over the last few years, the development of broadband connectivity while on the move has been such that users are now expecting the same quality of service when they are traveling than at home. And non-GSO systems are in a very good position to serve this growing market with low latency. It's important to mention, and we saw in the preview, in the panel before the hour, before hours, the last two WRCs in 2015 and 2019 have adopted regulatory frameworks for the operation of regimes, but communicating with GSO space stations in FSS and Ka-band. And now, with the development of non-GSO constellations operating Ka-band, bringing very high throughput and low latency, we are of the opinion that there's now a need and an opportunity to develop this framework for Ka-band non-GSO regimes. We have no doubt that the development of a harmonized technical and regulatory framework for the use of regimes using non-GSO FSS systems will facilitate the development of and access of affordable broadband connectivity for all, regardless of location. Said that, we would invite the CITA, at least the administration, especially in the CITA region, in our region, Latin American region, to participate of these studies for the development of these regulatory provisions, especially in the same way that administrations have been supportive aims to operate with GSO FSS systems in the same band. We think there's a very, very good opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other perspectives on agenda item 1.16? Okay, so Michelle, certainly I want to echo your call for administrations to participate in the studies. I think this is a very significant opportunity for non-geostationary satellite operators. Michelle, I want to come back to you on a different agenda item, which is 1.17, which covers satellite-to-satellite links in the KU and KA bands. And specifically, agenda item 1.17 is seeking to determine and carry out, on the basis of ITU-R studies, the appropriate regulatory actions for the provision of inter-satellite links in the 11.7 to 12.7 gigahertz, 18.1 to 18.6 gigahertz, 18.8 to 20.2 gigahertz, and 27.5 to 30 gigahertz bands or portions by adding an inter-satellite service allocation where appropriate. Michelle, what's your perspective on this agenda item, which is seeking to determine whether satellite-to-satellite links in KU and KA bands is appropriate?
David, we see this agenda item as another very important agenda item for the satellite community, because this agenda item 117 may open up the door to a non-orbit data relay service for non-GSO space stations, which would eventually have an additional means to download their data to the ground. This satellite-to-satellite service would enable a higher volume of data that would be possible to download to the ground, plus a real-time or near real-time to link to the ground. It's a very appealing solution for all those missions, especially Earth observation and space science, for which data download is a bottleneck and a design driver. It's important to highlight that operations of space stations in low and mid-Earth orbit, LEO and MEO, are increasing fast for scientific, academic, and commercial purposes. From the International Space Station to small CubeSats, the capabilities to transmit and receive data is essential. All these systems need to move data down to Earth or to other satellite terminal locations in an efficient, fast, and cost-effective manner. And telecommunication satellites offer ready means to fulfill this need. Data generation is only increasing, and we see, in our view, this agenda item 117 perfectly answers these needs. And last but not least, in our view, satellite-to-satellite links operations would enable more efficient use of existing FSS spectrum, offering fast implementation using existing assets.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. So I think you highlight with this agenda item one way to address, which seems to be the insatiable appetite for data. Intersatellite links certainly provide the means to download tremendous amounts of data, which is critical not just for communication satellites, but also for Earth observation satellites. Michelle, you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add something that I think it's very, very important, that at least the satellite, the view of SES, and it's a consensus within the satellite industry, that we support the sharing and compatibility studies to these satellite links, but we think that studies we don't think that additional allocation to the satellites, an additional allocation to the inter-satellite service in this frequency band should be considered. I think this is very important to highlight. That is the position of the industry, that an additional allocation to ISL should not be considered. But the provision of appropriate regulatory actions for the provision of satellite links in the FSS. I think we should make this consideration. I think it's important to highlight that.
Thank you for that point. Adrian, were you asking for the floor to comment?
No, yes. I wanted to add that this is a very imaginative agenda item and very interesting. And I was thinking what Michelle said, the number of constellations of satellites, scientific satellites observing the Earth that have to wait until they see their Earth station to download their data. Why wait for that Earth station when you have a geostationary satellite in view all the time? And it's very interesting, and we have certain interest on it.
Yeah, no, it's important to add. I think that today the definition of FSS also incorporates satellite links. We have that, and we have satellite links today. But today we have that under number 4.4, the radio hex. And so we think that it's important to have the proper regulatory provisions in the radio hex to have the security and to guarantee that no interference, to have secure and that no interference will be, that no service will be interfered. We have proper interference studies, and we have protection to terrestrial services. We have protection to GSO and non-GSO. So I think it's a very good opportunity. It's a very important agenda item.
Okay, well, thank you. We just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to focus right now for a question for Hector, and this is concerning a topic, not an agenda item, but a topic 9.1c. And what this does, it calls for the study of the use of IMT for fixed wireless broadband in the frequency bands allocated to the fixed service on a primary basis. Hector, can you just comment on this in a minute or so?
Yes, David. Maybe we can start saying something regarding with the background of this agenda item. According with 175 for the WRC-19, call for studies on the use of IMT technology for fixed wireless broadband in the frequency bands allocated to the fixed service on primary basis. The second point is that no indication was given whatsoever regarding the frequency range that should be studied. Therefore, all primary fixed service allocation, including those co-allocated with the FSS, will be subject to be studied. The third point is the WRC decide that all topics in the agenda item 9.1 should not have any regulatory implication, nor imply changes in the radio regulation. So for this agenda items, we are agree at the same time as the satellite industry support studies aimed to facilitate the use of IMT technology for the deployment of fixed wireless broadband in bands allocated to fixed service, provided that such use doesn't impact negatively nor create additional interference to primary FSS allocations. This is an important condition that we need to take in account. And regardless of the outcome of the studies under the topics, no additional allocation to MS or IMT identification should be considered. So in general, this is the main points around this agenda item.
Okay, well, thank you. And we do have a few more minutes, and I would like to come to Adrian to cover the last agenda item that I wanted to cover in this discussion, and that is agenda item 1.19. And for the audience, so 1.19 is to consider a new primary FSS allocation in the space to Earth direction in the frequency band 17.3 to 17.7 gigahertz for region 2, while protecting existing primary services in the band. Adrian, what's your perspective on this agenda item 1.19?
Thank you, David. My perspective is that this is a very simple agenda item, but can be really effective and can be an example of effective use of a spectrum, because the band today in region 2 is allocated to BSS in downlink and Appendix 30A for feed and leaks in uplink, and they coexist together. And there is no difference in sharing in using BSS in downlink and FSS in downlink. So why not to allow the operators and administrations to decide what they prefer to use, BSS or FSS? So on the other side, it would add 400 megs to the Ka band because it's contiguous to the Ka band. And these 400 megs, the good thing is that they are not shared with terrestrial services. So they could be used for user terminals or gateway terminals. So in order to provide, to have more spectrum to provide better broadband services, it's really interesting and shouldn't be controversial at all in the conference if we do the things properly, because the coexistence is demonstrated with the current BSS that is working perfectly. So that's my general view on this agenda item.
So not controversial. Let's keep our fingers.
Shouldn't be.
Yes, fingers crossed. Any other perspectives from the panelists on agenda item 1.19, or if you have any thoughts on any of the other items that we've covered? Okay, well, I want to thank our excellent panelists. This has been a very good discussion, highlighting the opportunities as well as the risks to the satellite industry with some of the agenda items and topics under consideration for WRC-23. So with that, I want to thank again the panelists and look forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.